Okay. So just to recap, we were talking about that Mashiach energy is all about like the third option, and that exile mentality is like black or white. Either there's only space for this or this. My option, my personality, your thoughts, my thoughts, and everything had to be tit for tat. And that exile mentality, I'm sorry, redemptive mentality energy is like where there's all of a sudden there's space for everyone and everything. And that the first Beis Hamikdash represented more spiritual energy, transcendent energy that wasn't integrated, and the second Beis Hamikdash was more integrated and more. Uh-oh, someone needs to put on mute, please. Panina. Um, the second Beis Hamikdash was more physical, more grounded, but didn't have access to as much spiritual energy. And that the third Beis Hamikdash is like the third way, where it fuses the spiritual and the physical. So redemptive energy is really comes down. Sorry, someone's not on. Could everyone mute themselves, please? Okay, I think I got it. Um, so again, I'm repeating myself, sorry, but I get distracted by side noises. Redemption is about the third option. So I'm going to give some examples, a lot of examples of what does the third option look like. So first of all, so the Rebbe said in this week's Sikha, he said like, let's say in this week's Parsha, Avet Hanan, it talks about the Ten Commandments again. It repeats the Ten Commandments. So one of the things the Rebbe asks is like, why are we repeating the Ten Commandments? We already had it in Parshas Yisro, where we got the Ten Commandments, and now it's repeating it in Parshas V'eschanan. So the Rebbe said that the two times that the Torah talks about the Ten Commandments represents the two different times we got the Luchot. The first time was when we actually, Hashem like revealed himself, and there was thunder and lightning and, this big powerful commotion, and like our soul left our bodies twice and we couldn't even handle the light. It was so powerful. And then we know that Moshe had to continue giving it over because it was like too powerful for us. And we got the Ten Commandments, the Aseret Dibros. That was the first time. So that represents the first light. It's like spiritual energy that's like we can't even contain it in our body. It's like transcendent. And then we know we sinned with the golden calf, with the Chet Egel, and we separated from Hashem. We had that separation. And then ultimately we returned, we did Teshuvah, and then we got the second chance, and we got the second Luchot where Moshe went back up, and, because he broke the first ones and he remade it with Hashem and brought it down. And we got the Luchot again. And that's why it repeats it in the Torah, because the Rebbe said this parsha is talking about the second time, and it was much more earthly. It came from down below, where the people actually, like us, we repented and we felt bad and we wanted to return and we wanted to reconnect, and then we drew down the ability to get the luchot again and reconnect to Hashem in an even deeper way, and it was very integrated, but it was still limited. And the third way is that the Rebbe said is like the Torah Chadasha. It's like the Mashiach Torah, that we're going to understand Torah that's way beyond the first time we got the Torah revealed, and way beyond even the second time, where it was even a higher level because it came from the transformation of doing teshuvah and drawing it down through our own efforts. But the third one is going to be a Torah Chadasha that's like so much more infinite and so much bigger and so much greater than we ever imagined. And actually, if you look at a Torah scroll, there's all the Hebrew letters, right? The black ink that takes up space, and then there's like all the white space around the black letters that are the empty space. So that's all that space is for the infinite findings that we're going to discover as we get closer and closer and closer to redemption and learn more and more and more about the Torah in a way that we never knew. Another thing that we know of the third way is, like in the emotions, there's chesed, and there's kindness, and there's gevura, there's boundary, and then there's tiferes, which is the harmony of the two. And it actually means harmony and beauty. And it's like the beautiful combination. So a lot of times, like an exile mentality is like, oh, I have to say yes, the person's going to be mad at me, like people pleasing and this like giving. Or like you could be very boundaried and be like, absolutely not. I'm sorry. Like I just take care of myself. And a Geula perspective is like the third option, which is Tiferes, which is beauty and compassion and harmony. And it's like, you know what? Like how about like, you want to come all week and that's too much for me. You want to come every night for dinner, but like, how about you come just for Shabbos or just for one dinner? Or how about we do potluck and you bring some stuff and I bring some stuff? And it's like, make space for other options. Another thing that's actually so hashgacha pratis, amazing. My sister, my younger sister, she's a relationship coach. Also, Sarah Schwartz. She's on this. And she shared something. I actually saw an interview today that she was talking about the third way in marriage. And I was like, wow, that was so interesting that I'm watching it today, because the Rebbe's whole sicha this week is about the third option, the third Beis HaMikdash, what this third option is. Of course, timing is perfect. So she was saying, like, a lot of times in relationships, and of course, I'm sure we could probably all relate to this. Like, let's say our spouse, or if not a spouse, like a friend or whatever, comes to us. And the example she used was very grounded and down to earth. So I'll just repeat it. She said, let's say, like, we're the woman and like we had an exhausting week. We were working a lot, or you have a little baby, or, you're not feeling so great or whatever. And then your husband comes home and he's like, you know what? I want to invite my whole family for Shabbat and all these friends and all these guests. And like, I want to do a big dinner. And if you're exhausted and you're tired, you could, the woman might get like offended or like, defensive and be like, what? Don't you know I'm exhausted? Like, I've been working so hard, and like, why would you even bring it up? Like, and almost like, absolutely not. But she shares something that's so beautiful. And then it could just like blow up, because like, he's like, you're not listening to my desire. And she's like, well, you're not honoring me. And then both feel unhonored. And it just like ends up, in an argument, both people feeling bad. So a third option, she said, is so beautiful. It's like, there's space for it all. And that's what the third option is. Like, when it's bringing Hashem in, it's like, there's space for everything. Hashem's infinite. So a scenario like that would be, your husband says like, oh, I want to bring, all these guests and our family for Shabbat. So you say, oh, like, you reflect and you hold space for that. And you're like, oh, I see you want to like bring a lot of guests, or you want to bring our whole family over. And then you could see value in it and see like what's positive about the fact that he wants to invite all these people. And you could admire that and say, you know what, it's amazing. You have so much achnasas archim, or like, you're so social, or you're such a generous person. He's going to be the one to pay for it, and like really see the value in it. And then at the same time, like, so he's received, there's space for what his desire. And then at the same time, there's space for honoring me. And it's like, well, I'm exhausted and I really don't feel up for cooking. I've been cooking all week. I just don't feel like I could cook for 100 people this week. And then it's like, okay, I heard you and I heard your desire, and I'm sharing what I need too. And then from that space, a third option could come up. And it's like, oh, the husband doesn't need to be defensive because he was just received. And then it's like, oh, I hear you. You don't want to cook. What if I cook? Or what if we, cater it? Or what if we bring, more cleaning help and someone to clean and someone to help cook? Like, all of a sudden, it's like, there's options. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to become a little war. I'm going to run through a few more options, and then I'm going to stop, and then love to hear, and we could really discuss this more. Another very, very practical option also from another sister-in-law of mine. She wrote this little cute book called You, Me, We. And it's like this little, geula book for children, because it's amazing how like this exile mentality, like everything is such a big deal and everything is so overwhelming. Like that example in marriage where it's like, you can just shift your perspective and all of a sudden it's like, wow, things that we've argued with for years, all of a sudden there's like space for both of us. So this is also the third way, always just like shifts everything and makes space for it all. So it's called You, Me, We. And she said so many times kids, they get into these fights when they're arguing. They're like, no, it's my toy. It's my car. No, I was first. No, you were first. And it's like, they just go in circles, right? And grabbing it. No, it's my turn, my turn. So she says it empowers kids to basically learn how to communicate, and says, it's very simple. You, me, we. So, even a 2-year-old, 3-year-old can say like, you say, you say, oh, I see that you're playing with the car. So you're making space for you. And then you say, me. I also really want to play with the car. So now there's you and there's me. And then there's the third option is we. How can we work it out that we're both happy? So simple. And literally, like, I taught it to my kids and I remind them, I'm like, you, me, we. And there's no option for but. So like if you say you're playing with the car, I also want to play with the car. How can we both be happy? And then one kid says, I'll give it to you in an hour. And the other kid says, no, I want it in 2 minutes. So then you're going to have to keep figuring out, well, how can we both be happy? How can we both be happy? And then maybe we'll have to resolve it at 10 minutes and compromise. But the point of this is another example of a third way. Okay. Another thing is, we know the third way is that this is also another like really a geula mind shift is that, and this is more Kabbalistic and more deep, but the concept of there's two, and there's Yaakov and Esav, right? The two brothers. And Yaakov had very more like he followed the rules, like he learned Torah and did what was right and, was the good boy. And Esav was the wild boy and very passionate and, loved hunting and was in the field and very physical. And they were very, very, very different. And actually, it's one of the questions as a kid, I always grew up wondering, like, how is it that Yitzchak wanted to give the better blessing to Esav if he was so wild and so inappropriate? Like, wouldn't he know he was a tzaddik? He was a righteous person. Like, why would he have wanted to give it to Esav? He should have, given, obviously known that it's for Yaakov. But the answer is that he saw the potential in his son Esav and saw the fact that he had such a passion for life and such a passion for like, having fun and having pleasure and enjoying it. The only problem is that Esav didn't have Hashem with him. So he didn't know how to take this like powerful physical pleasure, lust and desire for life and channel it in a healthy way. And Yaakov was the opposite. He had all like, doing what's right and being connected to Hashem, but he didn't have that pleasure and joy. And until now, we've been very much in the Yaakov energy of like doing what's right and wrong, like knowing what's right and wrong and staying appropriate and like maybe staying away from like desires and pleasure. But we know that in the story in the Torah that when Yaakov was returning to his brother Esav, he ended up wrestling with Esav's angel all evening, and they were wrestling and wrestling and wrestling. And in the end, Yaakov wins, and Esav's angel gives him a blessing and says, "Your name is Yisrael," which is where the children of Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael, where we get the name from. And Yisrael it basically is a higher level, and it's the level of the combination of both lights, of Esav's lights and Yaakov's light. So we say like, oh, is Esav a higher light or Yaakov the higher light? No, Yisrael is the highest light. Yisrael is when we reach our personal Israel, when we got to a place where we know that it's the fusion of both, where we have pleasure and we have desire and we enjoy the physical and we have beautiful homes and beautiful clothes and delicious food and go to beautiful places and see Hashem and everything, but in a way that we can channel in the right way, in a way that's with Hashem, that we see Hashem in everything. And, it's like you're doing an art project and you're like, seeing Hashem in that. You go to the beach and you're like, wow, look, Hashem is such an artist. And, a lot of times, like I look at sunset with my kids and I'm like, look, Hashem is painting the sky, Hashem is amazing. So really the highest level with Mashiach is going to be the fusion of both. Like the third Beis Hamikdash, again, is the combination of the first and the second, where it's going to be Hashem's powerful transcendent light, but in an integrated way, down to earth, in a way that we can really, really, really enjoy the pleasures of the world and be in this physical world and enjoying it. It's not a contradiction. It's going to be a fusion of everything. Hashem's essence is going to be in the physical. So like one of the, also can be confusing because it's like, oh, when Mashiach comes, we're going to be like all soul and we're not going to have any evil or any temptation. But then it also says we're going to be completely embodied and like the body is going to be on a higher level. So what does that mean? Are we going to be body or are we going to be soul? So it's the third option. The third way is that we're going to be both. We're going to be like our bodies. We're going to be so grounded and so in our bodies and so connected to the earth, but we're not going to have any evil or distractions because our nervous system is going to be completely healed. So our whole body is going to be a vessel just for light. So we're going to like see Hashem and everything and be able to experience Hashem and everything in such a grounded way. Am I making sense? Just making sure. Okay, so actually, I want to say something about Tu B'Av, which is so interesting. The Rebbe speaks about this, that, today's Tisha B'Av, which is the ninth of Av, and in a few days is another holiday, which is Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av. And we know it's the full moon. And the thing that I've always known about Tu B'Av, the only thing I've ever known about it is that I asked yesterday, I gave a class and I said, does anyone know what Tu B'Av is? And they're like, I think it's like the Jewish Valentine's Day or something. I was like, oh, that's funny. But it's the day that, it was known for. It's a full moon, and like a lot of the single women would go out and like wear beautiful clothing and go out under the moon and dance, and basically dance under the moon. And then men would be able to go and look at them and like see who they want to marry. It was like a big singles party. So one of the things that, people could ask is like, how could it be? Judaism is all about like modesty and separate between men and women. And like, why is it that there's a Jewish holiday that women all of a sudden could like go out and dance and like be in front of the men? Like, how is that appropriate? So the answer is that Tu B'Av is literally like the highest possible level of light that there could be, because always on the 15th of the month, on the full moon, it's very, very high light. Like we were taken out of Egypt on the 15th of the month of Nisan, right? And Sukkot starts on the 15th of the month because the full moon is like representing actually Geula energy. It's like the feminine light that's in its full glory, which I could talk about for another hour, but I want to stay focused on what I'm trying to say. So why is Tu B'Av the highest level? Because Tu B'Av is the transformation of Tisha B'Av, and the light that comes after the darkness is the highest light. Now, I just want to go back. I know a couple of you might have heard this already, but for those of you who heard and I didn't, I think it's important. Like, why is Tu B'Av the transformation of Tisha B'Av? Just because it's in the same month and it's the full moon, what's the connection to Tisha B'Av? So I want to go give you the original story of Tisha B'Av, that actually the first Tisha B'Av happened even before the Beit HaMikdash, before they were destroyed. That when we were in the desert, and I say we because it was us, it was our souls, we're all reincarnated from those souls. We were in the desert and we started panicking, like, here we are, we came out of Egypt and we're in, nomads traveling in the desert, and we don't even know, we're trusting Hashem that like we're going to a better place, we're going to Israel, but what if Israel is not even that great? I don't know, we just came out of Egypt and Egypt was horrible. Like how can we, rest assured that Israel is good? So as we know, the story goes, we sent spies to the land of Israel, and as the story goes, the spies came back and saw things that looked bad, even though they weren't bad. And they came back and gave a negative report. And, oh no, Israel's terrible and we're never going to win the war. And there's diseases there and it's going to be horrible and terrible. And so all the Jews went into mourning and grief because, oh no, if we left Egypt and we're in the desert and now we'd lost our homes in Egypt, even though what kind of homes were that and what kind of life was that? But we're nomads, we have no home, there's no point, we don't even want to go to Israel, we're never going to succeed, we're doomed for life. And so they went into grief. And that was on the day of Tisha B'Av. It was the original day of mourning. And then the punishment for that was that for 40 years, the men between 20 and 60 would die. So every year on Tisha B'Av, literally the Jews would build a grave, and the men would go and lie down in the grave, and they didn't know if they were going to wake up or not, and whoever was supposed to die would die. And this continued year after year on Tisha B'Av. So like the grieving and the mourning continued, because every year Tisha B'Av people would die, and I'm sure it was devastating. And after 40 years, when they were about to go into the land of Israel, and it was over, but they didn't know, and they built a grave, and the men went in, and no one died, and they're like, that's weird. People are supposed to die, so they built a grave again and again and again and again, for, I guess you could say, for 5 or 6 nights. And then in Tu B'Av, they saw that the full moon was out, and they said, you know what? There's a full moon. It's already been 5 nights. I think we can rest assured that the gezerah, that this punishment's over. And so they burst into dance and song and celebration, realizing that that phase is over, and they're ready for the next phase, which is like more geula and going into the land of Israel. So Tisha B'Av is the original day of grief when we're in the land of Israel, and Tu B'Av is the original day of transformation when that was over and they were celebrating and full of joy. Now, Mushki Silverstein's on this, and she was the one, this was her Terra Hadasha, and she shared it, and I love it, and I keep repeating it because I think it's so valuable that she said, it's so interesting how in those times, like, even though it was over and they were ready to like actually conquer Israel and that traveling was over and also the punishment was over, they were so used to Tisha B'Av as a time of grief and Tisha B'Av as a time to die that they kept making those graves. And then Hashem was like, no, it's over. Nobody died. Celebrate, move on. But they were like, no, maybe let's try one more night. No, because they were so used to that, like people die in Tisha B'Av. And it took them until Tu B'Av to be like, look at the moon and say, wow, maybe there's a new way. Maybe this is something different. So just to think about now how like how many of us keep digging our grave and be like, that's all we know. We live in graves and we just keep digging ourselves and getting ourselves in these messes and just like, it's either me or you, and there's only this much love in the world, so I have to fight for it because if you get it, then I won't have enough love for me and all of this. So, Tu B'Av, the full moon represents, it's like there's enough for everyone, there's enough light. No, but that wasn't my point. My point about Tu B'Av is I need to go back to the woman dancing. What does that represent? Why were we on such a high level that we were able to actually watch the women dancing? I mean, the men were able to watch the women dancing and there was no lust. There was no, lack of modesty. It was so pure. Why? Because we were on such a high level. And that's a little taste of what is Mashiach, what is Geula, redemption, when we say, no, we're gonna literally come back to the physical world. There's no separation. It's not gonna be like, oh, we're too spiritual, so we can't enjoy the pleasures. We're gonna be in such a high level, like the women were literally able to dance and men were able to see it for what it was in their purity without there was nothing immodest about it because they were so connected to a high, powerful light with Hashem. So that's why people, when we understand, like, why, when Mashiach comes, why would we be more physical and have more pleasure and more earthly and more like, into like beautiful clothes and beautiful homes? Why? Because we're going to be so connected to Hashem, and the light is going to be so powerful that when we look at our Shabbos table, we're going to say, this is Hashem. And when we cook food, we're going to say, this is Hashem. And we wear beautiful clothes, we're going to say, thank you, Hashem. We're queens. All of this is for us. Hashem made this whole world for us. There's not going to be no separation. That's the third way. It's the combination of both. Okay, I have one more thing to say about the three. But actually, I think I'm going to pause and hear if any of you guys have anything to say. Come on, guys.
I want to say it's beautiful. Continue.
Give me a break.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the stories. I had never heard that story before. But with the graves, you said the men laid in the graves and they died. What about the women and children? Did this not? So were there some women who actually were able to go in, and it didn't apply to the women?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure, anyone correct me if I'm wrong, but the women have always been more connected to faith and spirituality and to truth. And actually, even like we know, going back to the time when we were in Egypt and the men were like, forget it, we're not having any more kids, we're just going to be in exile forever. Like, we're hopeless, we're just slaves, you might as well kill us now. That the woman led by Miriam had tambourines, right? And they were like, no, we will be redeemed. There is better time. And thanks to Miriam, actually, Moshe was born because she said to her father, right? Like, you're even worse than Pharaoh. Like, we have to have more kids. We have to trust in Hashem. And there's a known thing that when we actually got out of Egypt, most Jews were terrified and they actually preferred to stay in Egypt than to go out because the unknown was more scary than the suffering. And I think we could, as an adult, I can relate to that now. Like as a kid, I'm like, most Jews stayed in Egypt. Why in the world? How could you stay in it? But now it's like, for us to experience redemption and for us to experience newness and to change from our old patterns and the things that are really making us suffer and not working, we have to step into the unknown every single day. And we have to trust that there's something better and go into spaces that we've never experienced. And it's terrifying. A lot of times we'll keep falling back to old patterns just because we're not willing to step into a void or to the unknown. But anyways, about the woman, so 4/5 of the Jews stayed behind. And what I heard was actually 4/5 of the men, that actually all the women went out and the tribe of Levi, and I guess the kids also, and it was actually the men who were the ones not going out. So, and it was the one like who did the golden calf? It was the men. The women didn't want to be part of it. They didn't want to bring it. Says the men went and took jewelry from the woman because the women were like, no, you have to trust. Moshe's going to come back. How can we do this? So the women were always, you know, connected to something so much higher. And like we have the natural faith and the natural belief that perhaps is harder for, you know, masculine energy. So I never heard this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if the women weren't the ones who, you know, believed in that negative report.
From what I remember, this is true. The women wasn't a part of it.
We're not part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense. Fits in, right? By the way, I mean, not it's a side note, but it's not a side note that every story that we learn is here to teach us about now and about redemption now. And a lot of women, including me, sometimes are like, why do we have to be the ones doing it? Like, you know, it's like we see things or we know certain things and we're like, how could we trust in this or believe in this if our husbands don't see it, or if the rabbis are not saying it, or if the men are not saying it? And I mean, history is repeating herself. The Rebbe said very clear, like we are the women of the women from that got out of Egypt, and we will see and understand and experience things that the men will cannot right now or will not. I might even think we're absolutely crazy or argue with us. And we have to know and believe that the women have been blessed with this, especially redemptive energy, because the moon is feminine energy, and Mashiach's all about the moon coming into its full glory. So women are going to naturally understand, you know, what does Geula really look like, and what is, you know, how do we experience redemption and be the first ones to step into redemption, because it's when the Mashiach is about the world becoming feminine and going from a masculine world to a feminine world. So it's hard enough as it is for us to adapt. So of course it's going to be at least more natural for us because we're talking about feminine energy. So I hope that answered your question. Anyone else?
I want to thank you for bringing up about Yaakov and Esav and the angel. And I heard this maybe, I don't know, the last couple of weeks, something profound, that when Yaakov knew he was going to encounter Esav, it says that he gave him all his wealth. He gave him gifts, right? And I don't know the source, and I could find out, but this teacher that I have said that what he gave him was all of his exile consciousness, because he knew he was going to go into Geula and he couldn't bring that with him. And so he unloaded all of his exile consciousness, like all of his habits, all of his beliefs, all of the exile. And I was like blown away by that, because we're not going to take the same thinking forward into Geula. Like it doesn't match up. So it's demonstrated, like he demonstrated for us that he unloaded it, that he gave it up, and then he had nothing. Like, meaning he was so clear now, he was so open as a vessel, so humble to receive the new light that he was about to be elevated toward, which is the Yisrael.
Wow, it's so beautiful. It's so connected to what I was saying in the beginning, that, right, in order to make space for what we really want, first of all, we have to let go of old things in order to make space for new things, but we also have to know that there's something to replace it. I think that like one of the biggest things, like, let's say I know for me, like I was never able to, let's say, face certain parts of like my inner darkness or things that, like, you know, my exile inside of me, because as long as I thought that this is life and this is forever and there's nowhere else to go, even subconsciously you can't face it because you have to make it work. You have to, like, there's nothing better. So like facing it is just so painful. But if you know, like, no, we're literally shedding this to make space for something more and something so much better. And every time we release, even like, let's say a relationship, you know, it's not feeling so healthy and it's not vibing with us anymore. And it's not like bringing up the best in us, but, you know, an exile mentality is like, I have to hold on to it because love is limited. And like, this has been my source of love, or I'm going to be lonely, or I'm not going to like have a friendship. But if it's not working, you know, you trust and you say, I'm stepping away from this because I trust that something better is coming. Because the more and more and more and more we help our nervous system believe and trust that Hashem is unconditionally loving and he is out he's here rooting for us, and he wants us to succeed, and he's going to give us everything we need and has everything for us. The more we believe that, the more we can let go of things that are just not in line with us and not good for us, because we can trust. But in order to do that, we have to, and then this is my last point, and I think this is going to be really, it's very down to earth and really important. It's about healing the nervous system. And I'm going to tell you how it's connected to 1, 2, 3, the third way also. The thing is that because our bodies, literally in our nervous systems, were raised and born into exile, like our nervous system literally have old beliefs about things. Like huh? Someone say something? Oh. Like for example, I mean, we were raised in a very conditionally loving world. So it's like whoever outsmarts the next person or outdoes the other person or is cuter or cooler or smarter or whatever, then they'll get more attention. And if you're not, like, there might not be enough for you. Or like money, like money, it was terrifying. It's like money runs out and like we just might not have enough and we might be deprived, or anything, validation, being seen, like all these things, it's like what we experience. So even though it's not truth, if we don't heal that within us, we operate with that system. So we might be like, I don't know why I'm so overworked and I'm so exhausted and I'm like way overworking and it's not good for my family, but I keep going back. Why can't I like just be like have better boundaries and learn how to be? But if your nervous system believes that the only way you'll feel safety, or the only way you'll ever have money, or the only way you'll ever feel loved is if you prove yourself and work and work and work, then the second you stop, you're going to feel terrified and you feel like you have to chase it. So we have to comfort that space. I know, and actually that's very much connected to that. This week the Rebbe talks about a lot, that in this week's Sicha also, that this week's Shabbos is called Shabbos Nachamu, right? And that's my name, Nachama, Shabbos of comfort. And then over the next 7 weeks, we read, is it the Haftorah? Yeah, I think the Haftorah is passages of comfort. Like right after Tisha B'Av, we go into comfort because the Rebbe's handing it on a silver platter. Like, how do we heal our nervous system? I mean, we grew up this way. Like, this is like deeply rooted inside of our bodies. Like, how do we transform and get into a redemptive, mentality? And then the Rebbe says, Nachamu, comfort, that we could comfort. And I know for me, like I go into spaces where I'm like trying to make sense of everything and trying to answer it. And like, what does Hashem want from me? And why this world? And why am I here? And what is this world? And I just like cyclone crazy. I get like so overstimulated for myself because I'm like trying to find answers and I don't have answers. And the most amazing redemptive space that I could be in is whenever I get into that space to be like, I don't need to figure this all out. I'm human. Like, I'm not Hashem. And then just really, why am I trying so hard to figure out life and to like solve everything? And I'm like, oh, because I'm so uncomfortable. Because like, I don't know what's next, or like, I don't know what's going on or whatever. And then just bring comfort and be like, yeah, being human is hard sometimes. Like, we were created like to be receivers and to be vessels, and we don't know what the next second's going to be. And Hashem didn't even create the next second. And yet like we want to feel in control, but we don't. And wow, it's complicated to be human. Like, okay. And like comfort that space. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm being held in all the unknown, on all the discomfort. And then it could be okay. So I want to just say, again, like the 1, 2, 3, this is the coolest thing. I've been repeating it a lot the past couple weeks, but it's like this new information that I never knew. So one of the things that's important to know also, like, again, history repeats itself. And, we've grown up, many of us, I grew up learning the stories of getting out of Egypt and going through the desert and for 40 years. And then, we finally got to the land of Israel. And the Rebbe said, like, history repeats itself, and that redemption now is like redemption then, but just in a more integrated way through our own effort. And then we're like, where's Mashiach? Where's Mashiach? Where's Mashiach? Why didn't like snap our fingers? Like, we're just waiting for, Eliyahu and Avi to come and just like poof out of the air. But the Rebbe said very clearly, we're going through the same process. So we got out of exile. Yeah, we got out of Egypt, but we had Egypt inside of us. We were completely traumatized, and our nervous system was like very rattled, and we were used to like being, beaten up and deprived and everything. So we weren't ready to go into the land of Israel. There was one level of redemption, yes. But the second level of redemption is we needed those 40 years to heal. And oh my gosh, are we gonna have food? Yes, the food's here. Are we gonna have food? Yes, the food's here. And like, we're in the desert. Oh no, but the clouds, Hashem's clouds are surrounding us. They're hugging us. They're keeping us safe. And again, every day, soothe, reminded. Eventually, Egypt, our nervous system got healed, and we were ready to become the Jewish nation and to live in Israel. And it's the same thing now. The Rebbe said, Gula is here. What does that mean? Gula, I mean, people are still dying and people are still sick. And, some people are really extreme and they say like, well, Gula is here anyways. Or people are like, well, there's still pain in the world. So I don't know what the Rebbe meant. So there's no evidence of Gula. Or we can go deeper and be like, what does that mean? That redemption is possible, meaning we have the possibility of stepping out of Egypt. Yes, like the Rebbe said, Gula is here, meaning like we could get out of Egypt. And now, why is the final say, why are we not in Israel yet? It's only because whatever's left is just in our nervous system. That's all that's left. Whatever we're not experiencing, whatever redemption we're not experiencing is whatever we're still holding in our nervous system. So I want to explain that a little bit, and the 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 parts of our body, and so there's our mind, and there's our heart, and then there's our body. And exile mentality is very much like what I said about a husband and wife. And like the husband's like, well, this is what I want. And the wife's like, well, this is what I want. And it's like, oh, now we're just clashing and we don't know how to move forward. So an exile mentality is also like, I don't know, this is what my head said. This is what my heart says. I don't know. Should I listen to my heart? Should I listen to my head? I don't know. Like they're making me crazy. Like my head's swimming with ideas. My heart is swimming with ideas. I don't know. And the thing is that we need the third way is the body. And the body is, we know etzem is bones. And it's the same word as atzmut, which is Hashem's essence. And Hashem's, the highest voice of Hashem is in our body. And it surrounds the head and it surrounds the heart and it holds both parts and it makes space for something so much higher. I don't know, my head's saying this, my heart's saying this. Shh, calm down. Calm down your nervous system and get quiet. And there's a voice of even higher than that, which is Hashem's voice within your body. Now, what's so beautiful is that, well, how do we calm our body down if our nervous system is so rattled and we're so used to exile mentality? So I'm going to take this even a step further and connect these 3 parts to Moshe and Miriam and Aaron. So when we were in the desert, there was 3 miracles that helped us heal. And each of them were in the merit of Moshe, Miriam, and Aaron. Moshe, in the merit, it says in the merit of Moshe, we had man every single day come down from heaven. And in the merit of Miriam, we had the well, the traveling well, that we always had water, even in the desert. And in the merit of Aaron, we had the clouds of glory protecting us and surrounding us. And each of these 3 things represent the energy of Moshe, Miriam, and Aaron, and they are also within us. And Moshe's energy in our head, and Miriam's energy in our heart, and Aaron's energy in our body, like if we could tap into them, is how we actually get into full alignment. And like we could live with the third way, where we're not constantly in inner dialogue and constantly stuck and constantly this or that, or should I listen to this part of me or that part of me, and how do I move forward? And we get to a place where just like us in the desert, we're soothed and we had all our needs and we were protected and we had access to Hashem constantly taking care of us. We could feel that in our bodies if we heal these different parts and access. So Moshe was the man. It's the masculine part of us, it's the head. And what was the man? The man was like this ability to practice trust. Like they were like every single, even if they took extra man because they were scared, it said, the Torah says it spoiled. And by the time they went to sleep, there was nothing left because Hashem wanted them to practice going to sleep with no food at all. And are you going to trust that tomorrow the food is going to come? So like that inner Moshe inside of us is like, are you able to trust into something, that there's something greater than us holding us and like the Mashiach basically within us. Like there's this inner guide, Mashiach, that's like holding us and protecting us and giving us what we need and we can trust and let go. Miriam is the feminine light and it's the well, and it's the part of us that we have to dig deeper, like our creativity, our desires. Like Miriam had the tambourines and she was full of joy and dancing. It's that part of us that actually is much easier to tap into our head, although not necessarily the healthy part of our head, not the trusting part of our head. So that also needs work to tap into the Moshe energy of trust. And that part inside of us is tapping into the Miriam that was able to literally dance and celebrate and make tambourines in Egypt. I mean, if she could do it, we could do it. You know, we're in a time of much more abundance, and we don't literally have, you know, Pharaoh like over us, whipping us, even though we have an inner Pharaoh that's whipping us. Well, hopefully we're healing from that. But anyways, that part of us that like we need to develop and dig for is like, what gives me desire? What gives me joy? What gives me pleasure? And like dancing and singing and art and going and gardening, and that part of us that like we can sing and dance. And that's a big part of Geula, of redemption, of like really drawing out that self-expression and all of that, you know, developing that. And Aaron is the clouds of glory that protected, because Aaron was known for unconditional love, and he always, his way was the third way. People would come to him. It says like everyone went to mourning when he passed away, because he was always the one who calmed everyone down and like dealt with all the conflict. You know, people would come and say, I'm really angry at this person because he said this and this and this, and the other person said, I'm really angry because he said this and then he said, you're right and you're right. And he always found ways to, you know, bridge the gap. And you know, there's always a third way. He always brought harmony. And so the clouds of glory was like that love that he brought. Like Aaron's energy was love. We can embrace everyone. Everyone's equal. There's room for everyone. There's room for your feelings and your feelings. So the clouds of glory, again, is our body and it's our nervous system. And how do we heal our nervous system when we might feel so unsafe? And like, there's so many things that have been unsafe in our life, or things that are unsafe in the world or whatever. And then literally imagining, like, we don't have to like dig it out and talk about it and like, oh my gosh, I'm so traumatized. Just imagine like Hashem's clouds, literally, like whenever things come up and we feel rattled, or like I felt like there wasn't enough love, or I feel so scared or whatever, just imagine Hashem's clouds like soothing our nervous system, and like Hashem's energy coming inside of us, the places that feel scared. And that's the whole thing the Rebbe said, Gola versus Geula. We think Geula is like something like so opposite of exile, like it has to be some fantasy. But no, the Rebbe said Gola is exile, and Geula is the same word. It just has an aleph in it. That's the only difference. What does that mean? It's that the same world. It's just everything's going to be illuminated with Hashem. So the exile mentality is going to shift. Our consciousness are going to shift, and we're going to see Hashem and everything. We won't have the separation. So whenever we feel in a separated state, when we imagine Hashem's love coming and soothing us and everything, it just brings us to an equilibrium. It's the third way, and we could harmonize ourselves, and everything flows and everything makes sense, and there's not like that inner conflict and that inner war. And that is what's left. The Rebbe said very clearly, like Aaron's bringing in Aaron's love is the only thing that's blocking us from the final Geula. And it's really, really important to know, like when we know what's possible, like, you know, so what is Geula? It's the third way, when there's no inner conflict inside of ourselves, when we're clear, when we know what Hashem wants of us, when we feel balanced, when we feel okay with being, when we feel okay with doing, when we're not like rattled inside, when we feel really peaceful and really whole. So it's important to know, like, if we know that, and the more we experience that, then when we don't feel that, we don't have to be so afraid of that, because we know if we're not feeling that, it means that there's something off, and there's something that needs more love, or something that needs more soothing, or something that needs more Hashem. And we could just bring more and more and more and more love inside of us. And the more we do that, the more light we have, the more love we have inside of us, the more we can love others well, and, you know, see Hashem in others, and then be like Aaron, who's able to see Hashem spark in everyone. And when we do that, we elevate other people, because they feel, you know, we help them realize that they are Hashem inside of them, and they feel loved, so they feel soothed, and then they could pass it on. And ultimately, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, that we're all comforted and soothed and know the truth, how much we're loved and how safe we are. And, you know, first have the third base of Mikdash inside of us, which is experiencing the third way, right? And that everything works. And then ultimately, the third base of Mikdash mirroring what we experience inside of us. Okay, I'm done. Now we have
So good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
very,
you.
very
You're welcome. Anyone want to share? We're too hungry. Let me turn off the recording.
I'm so weak and tired.
Yeah, I hear you. Wait, how do I turn off? Oh, recording, stop. Stop recording.